Cardinal McCarrick is your fault. I'm Simon Rafe, and I'm taking the hard line. Welcome to Hardline, the show that opens with a deliberately provocative statement and just gets worse from then on. I'm your host, Simon Rafe, and joining me later will be my producer, Joe Enders, who comes up with most of the initial ideas for these shows and then despairs when they go in a totally different direction to the one he expected. And after that, the exemplar of all that is gentlemanly, the gentleman and scholar Brad Ely, will be joining me for a gentleman's chat to chat in a gentlemanly fashion about next week's coverage of former Cardinal McCarrick, who is, of course, your fault. I don't say that in an attempt to shift or even deny blame. I, too, am responsible for Cardinal McCarrick, just not personally and directly. But then again, neither are you personally or directly responsible for Mr. McCarrick. I mean, at least I presume you are not. If you, personally and directly, made McCarrick the way he is, then first off, just who are you? And secondly, get to confession and spend the rest of your life in prayer and penance. In fact, if you are anyone, get to confession and spend your life in prayer and penance. That is pretty much the one-sentence description of how to be a Catholic. McCarrick is your fault, is my fault, in the sense we are all members of the church, and there is a corporate responsibility in what happens to her members. We are, quite literally, each our brother's keeper. I don't say that in order to avoid personal responsibility. Far from it. I say it precisely to assume personal responsibility, even, I suppose, to accuse you of personal responsibility. I'm not saying we're all at fault to hand off my share and spread it around among someone else. I'm saying we're all at fault so I can take my share of responsibility and atone for it. This, of course, isn't just about McCarrick. Last time I talked about Joe Biden, who is a bad Catholic and who is our fault. Joe Biden is, of course, a wonderful, or perhaps horrible, example of a bad Catholic. He is a great poster boy for bad Catholicism. You can point to him and say, wow, that guy is a bad Catholic, and you would be 100% right. If they handed out awards for being a bad Catholic, Joe Biden would probably win some of them. At least the silver medals. Because when it comes to bad Catholics, McCarrick has him beat, right? McCarrick has them all beat. He's not just a bad Catholic, he's a cardinal. Or rather, he was. He was a priest, he was a cleric. He was in charge of trying to stop the very things that he did. He was not just a member of the church, but one of its leaders. He's everything Joe Biden is, just more. And he's our fault. He is the laity's fault. How many times have you heard the expression? You've probably used it yourself. You've certainly heard us use it. It's up to the laity to save the church. That was Fulton Sheen, a man who certainly knew a thing or two about evangelization and the Catholic faith. But what did he mean by that? A related quote, not often appearing alongside the headline encouragement that we're the ones who are going to save the church, save the world. We're the heroes, the ones who will get this done. There is a related quote where Sheen says it's up to the laity to see that our priests, bishops, and religious act like priests, bishops, and religious. Okay, so that's how we're going to save the church. At least that's how we're going to save the clergy, right? We're going to make sure they act appropriately, act according to their vocation, act in a holy and Christ-like manner. We can do it. Of course we can do it. Fulton Sheen certainly wouldn't lie to us, and he was a clever and erudite man, perceptive and practical. He wouldn't say a thing that was possible if it wasn't. He's not confused when he says that. He says it's up to the laity to save the church by making priests, bishops, and religious act like priests, bishops, and religious, and so he thinks we have the power to do it. And if he thinks we have the power to do it, why? We must have the power to do it. Fulton Sheen would know, right? If we have the power to do it, why didn't we? I mean, obviously, this isn't about McCarrick and us specifically. Probably few of us have even met McCarrick. Certainly none of us were part of his formation or had any meaningful influence on him. This isn't about us specifically and McCarrick specifically. This is about the laity in general, or the clergy in general, the church in general. But we do bear specific responsibility for someone. If we have the power to save the church, if we have the power to ensure priests, bishops, and religious act like priests, bishops, and religious, then what went wrong? We've already established we have the power. Fulton Sheen says so, and he's not a man to get that wrong. To illustrate the point, let's channel Jordan B. Peterson. If you have the power to clean your room, and your room is a mess, the mess is your fault. I didn't make the mess doesn't cut it. It's your room. You probably did make the mess, and you've got to live in it and deal with the consequences of it. You might have excuses. You might have justifications. You might even have reasons. No matter, if you have the power, you have the fault. Authority and responsibility are always in balance, always paired. If you could have done a thing and you chose not to, you were weighing the good of that thing below the good of something else. Somebody, specifically, probably multiple somebodies, bears the specific responsibility for McCarrick. Somebody, specifically, again, probably multiple somebodies, bears the specific responsibility for Joe Biden. We could go on and on through the whole sorry litany of the bad Catholics, and somebody or somebodies is and are responsible for them. Collectively, the laity are responsible, and you and I specifically are part of the laity. But more than that, we, you and I specifically, bear the responsibility for some other bad Catholic. There is some person out there who is a bad Catholic, or perhaps they're not even a Catholic at all, because of something we did, or more likely something we failed to do. We can squirm and try to avoid it. Well, it's not my fault Uncle John doesn't go to Mass and is on his third aunt. I mean, I told him myself back in '97 he should stop. First off, did you really? And only once? But that's not the point. Uncle John might not be your fault, but somebody is. Maybe it wasn't given to you to really speak to Uncle John, to really help him, but there was someone. McCarrick is not personally and specifically our fault. Joe Biden is not personally and specifically our fault, but someone is. And do you think there will be no more bad politicians, no more bad priests? Do you think the groundwork we are laying, or rather not laying, will not bear evil fruit in the future? When we say if it is up to us to save the church, that we need to make sure priests, bishops, and religious act like priests, bishops, and religious, that this just refers to fixing the problems now? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, a stitch in time saves 9, and all sorts of other aphorisms. The way to fix the church now is to invent a time machine. The way to fix the church in the future is to make sure we are doing the right thing now. The church, the thing Fulton Sheen says we can save, is a thing that exists in time and moves through time. She is not a static edifice made up of dusty buildings and tarnished golden statues. She is a living structure made up of living stones. We, the members of the church, are those stones. And the church militant, the church on earth, keeps having its stones replaced by new ones. Members of the church die and pass to their eternal reward, and they are replaced. And they weather and settle into the mortar, and moss grows on them, and I'm stretching this metaphor, but you get the point. The church in 20 years, in 50 years, in a century will be the church, but it will not be the same church we have now. Not in a sense of changed doctrines, but in a way you can understand clearly. There will be different people in it, and whether or not it is saved will be a function of what you do now. It is very hard to save the church as she exists right now. Stones are set in their courses and they are heavy to move. But the new ones being laid down are being laid in soft mortar, and they can be pushed and shimmied and shimmed into place before it sets hard. McCarrick isn't personally and specifically your fault. Joe Biden isn't personally and specifically your fault, but somebody is. And that isn't to upbraid you or make you feel awful or call you some dreadful sinner. First off, somebody is my fault too. I am just as guilty as you are. Secondly, we're all just as guilty as each other, but a lack of guilt isn't how we get saved. Contrition is. When you next go to confession, think about what you have done, but also what you have failed to do. Did you miss an opportunity? Did you stay silent when you should have spoken up? Did you consent to someone else's sin by failing to act? Maybe you don't need to confess it, but maybe you need to talk it over with your priest or a spiritual director, or just take it to adoration and see what Jesus and your conscience have to say. Somebody is your fault. That doesn't make you a bad person, except that it makes you human, and all humans are fundamentally and naturally bad people. Our nature is corrupted, is broken, is fallen, and only through Christ can we be elevated to goodness. Joe Biden and McCarrick aren't personally, specifically your fault, but a future politician, a future priest might be. And certainly someone will be, unless you take immediate steps right now to save the church, to help priests, bishops, and religious act like priests, bishops, and religious, to help others act like Christ. Fulton Sheen also said, all of the evils in the world are due to lukewarm Catholics. I put it to you, not admitting responsibility for the failure of bad Catholics is precisely what he meant. Thank you for watching Hardline. If you're enjoying the show, please go to churchmilitant.com for the whole episode. You must be a premium member, so to sign up, go to churchmilitant.com/go premium.